Okay. So everybody talks about the difficult second album from Ed Sheeran. This is the difficult after lunch slot. But of course we've entrusted it to some amazing people, chaired by Peter Natterer. Peter, I'm going to allow you to introduce everybody. It's a session about relationships between law firms, providers and their clients. Customer is king. So over to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, hi everybody. Welcome to the third panel today with a very interesting topic, and it's about the customer. Customer is king, and it's about improving the relationship between client and private practice through technology. Yeah, and I say we start with a brief round of introduction. I leave it to everyone themselves to give a brief intro. Maybe we start with you, Karen.
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Karen Battersby. I'm the Director of Knowledge, Learning and Development at Charles Russell Speechlys. So in my role, I am sort of looking at all the knowledge and skills that our lawyers and other professionals need to serve clients. And that also includes looking at innovation in the form of new technologies that we can introduce to improve client service.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Paul King. I'm the founder and head of April King Legal. I started the firm when I was 26, I think. I know I'm 38 now, so that now we've been going 27 years. So started from a little kitchen table, and now it's just a bigger table. But hopefully I can add a bit this afternoon to my experiences of the changing landscape in the legal profession.
Thanks, Paul. I'm Rachel Roberts. I work for Burgess Salmon as the head of business solutions. I lead a team of which I'm very proud. We're multidisciplinary, project managers, innovation specialists, technical specialists, and more recently change management specialists in how we actually make some of this stuff happen. It's probably the most challenging area that I have to cover. Mm-hmm. I'm a lawyer by training, but I hope I've evolved into something else over time.
Yeah, I'm Peter Natterer. I'm head of product at Justix, a legal tech company based in Cologne, Germany. And we are most known by our most popular venture, Hello Law, and are quite active in the consumer space, providing legal services. We are a marketplace with close to 16,000 customers in the Netherlands now, and almost 600 partnering lawyers. Yeah, and I'm very happy to chair this panel today with such an interesting topic. And yeah, let's get right into it. So Rachel, on the Burgess Salmon website, I read that you are providing the best mix of advice, service and value, and one line that particularly resonated with me from your corporate video is that you go the extra mile for your clients and develop long-term relationships with them. It was from Elizabeth Dunn, one of the partners of Burgess and Salmon. So how can, the question is, how can law firms evolve business practices to develop and foster these kinds of long-term relationships and to offer responsive, secure and personalized services to clients?
Well, I think this issue of high-value relationships, I think we must never lose sight of that's really the business that we're in, is building those high-value relationships with clients. And technology really comes to underpin and enable that. But it's not the whole picture. And I was thinking about, really, I think a good word at the moment is around alignment, how we align ourselves with the interests of our clients. How do we respond to their issues, their pressures? And we've come up with a sort of phrase that we're trying to use to test what we do against. And that sounds a bit twee, but it's been quite helpful. Is what we're looking at, is this technology, is this approach, is this skill set, is it going to help us to be more fast, fluid and flexible? Because that's really what our clients are experiencing. They're under pressure to respond to the business ever more quickly. They need to be quite fluid and flexible, and yet they feel they're holding the sort of compliance, if you like, for the company in their hands. So it's a big responsibility. And I think for law firms, we are building capability. And for me, I think that is changing from where we were a few years ago. So my team, a multidisciplinary team, are bringing in project managers, technologists, innovation specialists, people that can add to what the lawyer offers to enhance those high-value relationships, and that's been a big emphasis. And then I think the technology, for us, is about having a simple strategy. So three things that we're currently working with or on will be collaboration, automation, and analytics. And that's, for starters, you know, that's not hopefully where we'll stay, but that's getting us started. So what have we got? What are the tools that we are equipping our lawyers with around collaboration? And just to give an example, so we talk about personalised service. I think collaboration tools give us the ability to personalised service for clients. We're not in the consumer space. We're working for large businesses generally, and we're using technology to personalise an experience that our client will have in say, a large portfolio sale, using technology in a way that gives our client a tailored experience. Actually, we're giving a tailored experience to the other side, and we're also involving other professionals involved in that deal and creating a platform for people to work on. So that's one area that we've seen a lot of success in. Other areas, I think, more topical are around automation. We're not a firm that traditionally you'd associate with case management in the old days. You know, that's not the type of work we do, and yet I think there's more scope now to look at automation. I think barriers to entry are much lower than they used to be, even for small and medium-sized firms. I think actually the cost of using some of the tools that are available to us now has meant that it's accessible and that we should be open, we should be on the front foot, we should be exploring and building these three capabilities. So that's the kind of thing that we're doing at Burgess Sam. We're trying to be strategic. We're working with lots of GCs at large companies, so we have to think about who is our client and how do we tailor what we're doing to align ourselves with their the pressures that they're feeling. Yeah. So.
Okay, so the approach on the people side I found particularly interesting, to build up this complementary capabilities to the legal expertise.
Yeah.
Paul, would you say you have a similar approach to that? And how does your firm use technology to foster long-term customer relationships?
Well, lawyers are in the people business, so for us the idea of technology relating to the client is a little alien, I have to say. We try and push the technology to the back end and help us analyse the figures and the big data, which is great. But really our front of house are those people that are really good at the soft skills and the interpersonal skills. And we find that the biggest challenge. I think, we've got 25 law grads, millennials, for heaven's sake, and they're great, but you would be surprised. You think that they're all technology orientated, and actually they are getting a bit fatigued with digital. And when we talk about the client being king, well, you know, if you just ask the client, forgetting GDPR for 1 second, but if you ask the client, then they're getting fatigued themselves. They're getting fatigued with my own teenage children text me from the other side of the front room. So I think we've all had enough of that. In our office, we're going back not to chalk and slate, but there is a sort of social anchoring that's now. There's a picture on our Twitter feed. We've got the old style telephones. A lot of the millennials now, by the way, are looking for that anchoring, believe it or not. They're not looking for technology, and I think they're our future clients. Future clients of the law firm. So technology is about catching the wave, but getting the timing right. And ultimately, it's what benefits the client, and not jumping on it for the sake of it. If I just finish on that finally, just on that point, about 10 years ago, a lot of my peers jumped on the Facebook and the Google AdWords, sort of pushed all their budget on the marketing budget over to that. Whereas I stuck with regional newspapers. I'm not quite sure why, but I did. And actually, it catapulted our business because everybody deserted the papers, which meant I got much better rates, which meant in turn my profit was able to reinvest to the point now where we're in the national papers and all the people are coming back from the... I've started buying books again as well, not just Kindle stuff. So I think there is a movement. Board games are back in. You know, so cup of tea with a client. It's the old pastoral skills. If you want to be a top lawyer, I think now is the key to going forward. The tech will deal with the back-end stuff, for us anyway. We're private client law. So tech is very interesting, very exciting. But what it does for us, it allows us more time to do what we're good at, and that's see the client. And the big data is great for us because we can predict over the coming months the volume that we're going to have, number of clients, to within very small percentages. It's amazing, really. It fascinates me. So really, tech is good for us and will continue to be a thing. But it's not being frightened of it. I'm not a great techie. But if it puts me in front of a client more, then all well and good for me and the firm. So I'm excited by it.
So when is the right timing to introduce new technology?
Well, when it's right for the client. I mean, you know, if they're happy the way it is now, perhaps the answer will be never. You know, perhaps it'll be next week. You know, the title is "The Client is King," and so just because there's a movement somewhere doesn't mean to say it's the right thing to do. I think, having said that, that clients need leadership as well. I mean, I think it was Henry Ford who said, if I'd have asked the clients what they wanted, they'd have said a faster horse. Or words to that effect. So you can't always go on what the client, but you've got to make a judgment call. And I think we're in the people business, so you know, do what your clients want you to do, how they want you to act with them. It's not all about bots.
Yeah. Okay, so a bit back to the basics. Do you see it similarly, Karen?
Yeah, I mean, we've got a mix of private client and corporate clients, but I agree with everything that Rachel and Paul have said. I mean, I think there's also the element of what your competitors are doing as well as what your clients want. So we are seeing a real surge in certain areas of technology, like AI, in certain areas like corporate and real estate. So that's also driving client expectations of efficiency. I think all clients also want transparency from lawyers around what they're doing, their billing. So again, the analytics and the technology there can help us understand better what's happening and be more transparent with clients as well. I think though for law firms and for any organisation, the potential and the opportunities of new technology can be so overwhelming, and there's so much out there, there's so much emerging, that you've really got to think very carefully about your use cases. As we've alluded to, what problems are you trying to solve for the client? What benefits are you trying to achieve internally? Certainly for us at the moment, our implementation or investigation of technology is around primarily where we can be better internally, which then translates into better client service. There will be applications where there may be of direct use for the clients, but you've also got the culture of law firms, which I think they are willing to embrace innovation, but we've also got this history as lawyers where we can be quite risk averse. It can be quite an individualised profession, relying on an individual skill and knowledge. So as well as identifying where you're going to use the technology, there's then this huge change management process of bringing people, you know, kind of along with you to embrace that, which can take time. So I say you just have to really do in-depth research and really get your strategy for each piece of technology, you know, in place before you dive at, you know, and go and buy something or just get something in because everyone else is doing it.
Can I cut in there?
Yeah.
And I agree absolutely, but I've found that in terms of incentivising change from lawyers, that client pull, you know, is hugely important.
Yeah.
And if you can actually identify, we talk about two sides of the same coin, if it brings some efficiencies internally and you get client pull, you make the lawyers look good, then the adoption is much more likely to be successful.
Yeah, yeah.
And so we're trying to target initiatives actually where the client gets a benefit and we get a benefit, because that change management element, I think, whilst it's not easy, it's easier because there's a motivation there on the part of lawyers.
I think it's our job, isn't it, in the roles we have, is translating those benefits and getting people to see them. Because although, if you're talking to technology vendors, they know their products and they can see all this wonderful stuff, but perhaps sometimes vendors don't see the process we have to go through internally to then make sure everybody else is comfortable with that and will actually, embrace it.
So there's the fast-paced technological development on the one side, and kind of adapting to that and making sure that the cultural implications and the challenges for the internal setup is not too challenging.
Although I think we've got also a role to play in terms of challenging the mindset in a constructive way, and I think that's why it's not just about technology, it's about investing in, say, Karen's area, learning and development, to say what are the skills and what is the framework that we need, the way we need our lawyers to think is changing. And actually I think there's a real skills gap, and picking up on Paul's point, I think millennials are great and we need to encourage their enthusiasm and energy, but largely it's social media based technology that they're used to, whereas we're talking about legal service delivery, where we're delivering to some significant clients and really risky, if you like, it's risky processes. We've got to get it absolutely right, and we've got our insurers to think about. So we're not playing about with kind of the latest thing. We're trying to deliver robust solutions. So I think we need to create a framework for our lawyers to think within. So we're doing an advanced technology training program, where we're actually looking at what are the skills. We're talking about a future lawyer here, aren't we? Well, who is the future lawyer? Are there any future lawyers here, or do they know who they are? How are we actually going to gear them up and give them the skills that they need to say, well, actually, I can put this solution in there, or I can use this in that scenario. Or, as Paul says, well, actually, what really matters here is that very rich interpersonal exchange with a client, and that's fundamentally important and always will be. Do we need to bolt something onto that? Maybe, maybe not. And it's just having the tools to do that and the mindset to think in that way.
Right. And I think Niels from Fulcrum also spoke about this in his talk, to match the people's skills with the requirements in the business, and especially with the cases, and really put a lot of effort and development into that. And Paul, I remember from our first call that you were talking about evolving business practices as a set of small steps, as an evolutionary process. You're seeing this, and not as a huge disruption. So can you shed a little bit more light onto that?
I think technology, as we've seen, and actually individual learning as well, not just technology, but is achieved by small incremental steps. It's that old line that, it took me I was an overnight success, it took 25 years. I mean, it's little, it's just chipping away and learning compound knowledge, and I think that's true of tech. I think we see this great wave coming, but actually it's something probably as little as sorting out the email, which I picked up on earlier, not BCC and everybody else. It was a bit of a nightmare scenario, but so it's little things and getting people to think that way. And I think getting them to think, I think it's structurally, by the way, you've got to start planning ahead, well, personally, planning ahead to the areas of law. When I interview now, well, 10 years ago, everybody wanted to be a criminal lawyer, then they want to be a family lawyer. I realised it's because everybody was watching Suits. And then, this is true, and then just quite recently, it's been everybody wants to be an international human rights lawyer. And only recently I realised it's because they thought they'd married George Clooney. So it does show you what people are, which is a bit worrying, really. They're basing their entire career on media. But we have to accept the fact that my advice would be pick an area. Private client doesn't sound very exciting. Nobody walks into my office and said, oh, I know, I'd love to do a trust. They just, just doesn't happen. But really it's about it's the day-to-day life. It's what we, what do you want your legacy to be? And again, I'm not in corporate, I'm in a private client. But what do you want your legacy to be? It's not just about where and money and tax. It's, what do you want people to feel about here? And when I started, we had nucleus of family. Somebody was very happily married, 2 children very happily married, a dog, paid the mortgage off. And if I see that now, it's an exception, not the rule. We've got 2nd, 3rd, 4th marriages. Stepchildren, estranged children account for probably 1 in 4 of our clients now. 1 in 4 of our clients have an estrangement within the family. So again, we're looking at potential claims against the estate. The whole gamut of private client has changed, and so has my learning and our firm's learning now. So we've had to adapt to social changes, and we see it continuing. We're living older, we're living a lot longer rather. Mentally perhaps not keeping up as well, so there are mental health issues as well. So combined with all of those factors, I try and encourage everybody to look at private client actually. And if you're in contract law or black client, then I would worry, because that will be the first step where AI will take contract review. So I would start looking at diversification now, seriously, if I was in something else. Just my view.
So you're into a very, very specific law field and focusing on that, whereas, for example, at least what I took from the website of Charles Russell and Speechless, you have a much broader setup of different sectors that you're focusing on. So how does this? Do different sectors require different skill set, and how do you take that into the part of your knowledge management approach, for example?
Yeah, I mean, our sector overlay is client facing, so we're looking to provide different legal services to clients operating in certain sectors, with showing a depth of knowledge in those industries. So again, the type of knowledge and include the type of technology you need will vary according to what sort of practice area you're actually looking at. But I think I agree, you know, with what Paul's saying. You have to take things very slowly in each area. You have to consider each area. What is the right mix of skill, technology, process? What's the right approach? What are the clients demanding? And I think then, you know, one of the things that we have to get to grips with, particularly if we're looking to evolve or change a method of practice because either the knowledge or skills requirements are different, or the technology is there to introduce into part of it, is how you do train the lawyers to do something differently. And just taking the area of technology, I mean, it's great that we can all look at new technologies that we want to bring in to support a different practice, but often it comes down to how are we going to get the lawyers to use that, and often that comes down to what does the user interface look like. Is it something that is so alien to what they're used to now that they're actually going to adopt it? So we've got a number of big sort of technology projects on where we're looking to introduce dashboards and all sorts of new functionality to lawyers, and we've taken a step back and thought about actually when we try and train them, how is this going to be comfortable enough that they're actually going to be able to use it without just running for the hills straight away, because it looks so different to anything they've actually done at the moment. So I think there's a lot of thought and a lot of collaborative work we have to do with vendors around that as well, you know, to make sure that it's incrementally things that they're used to and that work are still there, and things that we want to change are presented in a way that people are at least comfortable to try it and then get to grips with it. And there is, you know, going back to the point about millennials, and I think this is sometimes overemphasised, you know, that millennials are totally different to, you know, other generations. All generations are broadly similar, but there is a difference between people who've grown up with technology, even be it social media, and people who haven't. And you do get the more senior people relying perhaps more heavily on their secretaries to help them, you know, turn on things or print things or whatever. And you're going to get, you know, younger people are very comfortable with doing things themselves because they've grown up with technology. So I think that going back to this individual skill basis, you really have to take all of that into account if you want to successfully implement anything that you want to do with technology.
Thanks.
Although I'd just add a sort of note of caution, I think, probably to myself, and picking up on something Paul said. I think if you regard legal work, certainly in a private practice context, you know, 3 generic types, you sort of transactional work, litigation work and advisory work. I think if you are in transactional work, you need to be thinking about sorting out your approach going forward and having a sustainable model for doing that work. I think things are changing more quickly. I think when you're looking at something like due diligence, contract review, when you're actually looking at automation, I think that is an area where all firms should be investing if they're going to stay in that game. Advisory is a little bit more around expertise, and so we need a slightly different approach. So I agree with what Karen's saying, that you can't just take a sort of one-size-fits-all, but I do think there's perhaps should be a sense of urgency around transactional-based work in particular.
But take the nature of the business requirements into consideration for that.
Well, typically, you see, one of the issues for law firms is we've used a sort of one-size-fits-all business model, and the way we do that is the way that we do this. And actually, what we need to do, and this is a challenge for a bigger organisation, is have a different business model for undertaking transactional work, and that is where I think firms who are going to continue doing that work have to be realistic.
Can I just add one on that point? I keep hearing this word today called competition, and what your competitors are going to do and all the rest of it. And it's an alien word to me, it really is. Collaboration I can live with, but competition is just alien to me, and I know that might sound a little odd. I mean, I worked for a small high street practice when I was in my early 20s, a sole practitioner solicitor, and at that time a lot of people are amazed that solicitors couldn't even advertise. I think it was 1986, 1987, don't know if anybody knew. So the yellow pages, I don't know if you remember, the doorstopper things were out at that point, and I just got a group of sole practitioners around Nottingham at the time to give me £1,000 each, and I got £10,000, and I spent £5,000 on a full-page ad in the yellow pages. And so that was the start of my collaboration. I was 25, and but I realised I needed to be at the front of the yellow pages, so I called it APRIL, the Association of Practicing Independent Lawyers. Of course, APRIL doesn't exist; it's not my wife. But this was where. Well, my wife wants, that's what she thinks. It's not my wife at all. Sarah's my wife. But that's my point, that it's going back to collaboration. If you're weak on some areas, then speak to your neighbour. In all my years, I've found law quite protectionist in general. People tend to think that somebody's going to rob my... I mean, I'm sat here, I'm quite happy to tell you anything. In all my years, I've never known it materialise. But people are very, very protection. So I would say, in fact, when we open a new area, we just invite all the other firms around for lunch and have a good chinwag. So I think if you're weak in one particular area, then collaborate. Pick the phone up and ring the guy. I was chatting to somebody over lunch, and I now know where that gentleman's office is, what his area of work is, and hopefully I can meet him for lunch next week, and we'll see if we can do any common ground. So collaboration's the key. Not, in my view, not competition. Plenty of work.
I mean, just to pick up on, I do agree. And I think firms are pretty good at collaborating and talking to each other. I know certainly in my area, we talk together with other firms about the new innovations. But I think where we talk competition of driving some of the changes, and take the area of AI and due diligence, which is becoming more and more the norm of the way that you do due diligence in corporate and real estate. The more firms adopt that, the more firms who haven't got it are going to start losing the work. So that's where they see that actually to compete successfully, to pitch to clients, they need to offer the same sort of technological service. So I think there's both collaboration in the sense that firms will talk about what's happening, and actually I think that I was at a conference and they said there was something like 38, maybe more, 38 vendors of AI for due diligence technologies. And I think, again, there's going to be some consolidation ultimately in the vendor market, because as more firms use certain suppliers, then clients might say, actually, if they use more than one law firm, I don't want a different experience when I go to different law firms. Why aren't you all using the same platform for due diligence in all different areas that we do? So I think that's going to drive some things. But I think, when you're actually pitching for the work in certain areas, then what your competitors are doing is also going to force you down a certain route.
Probably why I'm in my area.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I don't want competitors.
In a firm like ours, a lot the panel appointments being driven by procurement. So you're being benchmarked. And one of the dangers, of course, is that you want to tick the box and say, yes, we've got this system, or yes, we're using that system. How we actually use it and how we actually deliver benefits is much more challenging, and there's less transparency, I find, amongst law firms actually sort of giving very real examples of how they're delivering benefits to clients. And I think that is something that we need to work much harder at, is actually explaining to clients how it's benefiting them, but in a way, and Karen and I were talking about this earlier, that's mutually beneficial, because we need a sustainable business model as do our clients. So I think, you know, there are still conversations to be had, and in my context, Paul, I couldn't disagree more about competition. I think, you know, we've all got to be very real about the environment that we're in. We've got the big four accountancy firms, which I think is a topic for later in the day, who are investing serious money and have been for some time in some of these capabilities. And therefore, we'd be twee to just say, oh yeah, what law firms really need to focus on, and actually what I think you're very good at, Paul, in your context, is differentiation. And that traditionally has been very, very difficult for law firms. But with technology, I think there's a bit more scope. You know, it's how, if we can give that personalised experience, if we can not just come out with some generic product and build it and they will come, but listen to clients, have conversations with them and say, well, we've come up with this solution for you. We've thought about it and it adds this value and it complements the high degree of expertise that we're offering in addition, then I think that that's a compelling offering, and that's the kind of thing that we have to, so our firm has to try and position itself in that market. We're not a consumer-based law firm, but we are nonetheless. I think we have to learn lessons from some of the consumer firms that do it really well. Okay,
so you've been talking about competition and collaboration in terms of outside to other companies. But how about collaboration inside? I mean, a lot of law firms have an organizational structure that not necessarily benefits the collaboration with the partnering system. So at least with Rachel and Karen, I heard a little bit that this is an issue in your, or could be an issue in your company setup, not so much maybe Paul's. Where do you see the advancements in collaboration from the inside? Opportunity.
Yeah, I was going to say welcome to our world, really. I mean, it is the traditional law firm business model, and the way people are rewarded in law firms can often encourage individual behaviours. You know, my clients, my fee generation, that's important for me. And some of the new developments, some of the new technologies actually are going to make bigger benefits for the firm, bigger benefits for the client if people collaborate and don't sort of hang on to traditional ways of doing things, and actually accept that, you know, in an optimal legal process, they may have a different role to play. Their expertise might only become relevant in one particular area, rather than owning the whole relationship from start to finish and doing everything themselves. So it's back to this change management approach. It's back to really explaining the benefits, making people's lives simpler, showing, you know, how this translates into more profit, which all you know, law firms are after, you know, using that as the foundation for then introducing greater collaboration. But again, I do think law firms need to look at two things. With some of the advances in efficiency that the new technologies can bring, and I think as Rachel alluded to, you want benefits for the firm and the client, so you're going to have to look at your pricing models, because everybody's still quite wedded in law firms generally to the hourly rate. But if you're able to use AI or document automation or whatever it is to generate things more quickly, then it's not about the time you've spent, it's about the value of that job. And obviously you're making it more efficient, so that benefits the client, but equally the law firm is going to want some return from investing in the capability to be more efficient. So that brings you into the area of pricing models and moving away from some of the traditional pricing models, which again is quite a big change to get people into. And then the other thing, I think, as I mentioned, is the reward system. If you really want to people to collaborate, then you need to reward them for collaboration and for everybody's contribution to a particular process or a particular source of revenue. And a lot of firms are going down that route, but I'd be interested to hear from Paul, because have you got a more collaborative sort of business model that rewards people for collaboration?
Well, we have, and actually I haven't got any partners either.
Right.
It's just me. It's a very, very flat structure. So flat that we all talk to each other, surprisingly. In fact, you know, that's part of the problem with innovation, that the traditional model has been anti-innovation. You know, you worked all your legal career to get to the top, and so therefore it wasn't an incentive for you to adjust the status quo, to rock the boat, because you're then an equity partner and you're taking the profit. So why would you rock the boat? And that's so the whole structure, I'm afraid, is wrong. Going forward, whether we like it or not. I mean, when you talk about collaboration, we use barristers under the direct access scheme, for example. I've spoken at the bar conference, and again, they don't need to work with us directly. They don't need to work with chambers, where a client can go directly with them, directly to the barristers. So there's phenomenal opportunity going forward. But I think the model, in terms of collaboration, by the way, and both internally and externally, it's about forming little teams, isn't it? And giving people projects to do, and bringing in expertise. I don't need to be an expert in AI. I'll just bring somebody in to do the AI. And in terms of the scalability of our firm, well, we'll do 3 million this year. You know, and it's not all about money. I don't sound patronising, but you know, it is about being able to scale, and you can only do that with the data. And I can do it. By the way, here's the other advantage: I can make an instant decision. I get a call from a national newspaper at 5 to 5 on a Friday, and they've got a full page. I was in the Mail on Sunday this week, I think, or whenever it was, Friday. And on 5 to 5, I'll give them a yes. There's no email, there's no text, nothing. It's just my word. And so the ability for me to be very, very agile has given me that competitive advantage. So competitive advantage isn't just about AI and technology, it's also about your model, your business model. What we're sorry to press on, but what we're really waiting for is the new SRA handbook. That's what we're desperately waiting for at my firm. I don't know if you're aware, but it's Crispin Passmore, Policy Director at the SRA. It's going to go down from around 500 pages, thank goodness, be like the old yellow pages, to around 50. It's going to be outcome-based. And once that kicks in, which I thought was going to be the end of this year, it's going to be Q1, I think, of 19, we can have, you can be freelance solicitors, there's no 3-year PQE, we can bring in-house. Honestly, the world's, if you've not studied the new handbook that's coming in fact now they've even got an innovation space called a safe space. The SRA have got a safe space, so you can try these things out now, really. So if you're going to think about the model, your law firm model, I think now's a very good time to look at it. I would start with the model before the tech, by the way. Don't try and make the tech fit the model. I think that's a recipe for disaster, personally, but there we are.
The tech being more related to the how are your things running and to increase efficiency.
Yeah.
Yeah, and my take from that is especially being entrepreneurial about your business and embrace the having experiments, hypothesis that you test bit by bit to optimize stuff. Excuse me. So we've been talking a lot about internal perspective of organizations. Paul, you've been shortlisted for excellence in marketing and communication in the Law Society Excellence Award. What are your secrets, or what's your secret in marketing and brand strategy? Is it again this collaborative approach, or
no? I think our secret is that we just don't speak in jargon, and that's not meant to be insulting to. But the simple fact is, anybody can make things complicated. We've managed to speak in plain English, and it's been massively successful for us. It's not rocket science what we do. We put the client at the heart of everything, and it sounds very cheesy and but the fact is we use empathy tools. You know, what would the client want? If we walked in their shoes, what are they looking for? You know, it's very easy to say, well, look, I'm cutting my son out, for example. I don't spoke to him for 5 years, and he's a gambler, and he drinks, and I can't stand him. And Well, yeah, I understand your frustration, but let's look at some strategies and let's look at why that happened. You know, that's a different conversation to what other firms are having. So if you put yourself in the... By the way, I can only talk about private client. That's my focus, that's my specialism, because I'm a big believer in specialism. But I think you can adapt it across whatever area of law you're working in. I really do think you can adapt it. It's speaking in plain language has been one of our great triumphs, I think.
And just picking up on that sort of empathy point, I think that's applicable, you know, to what we do. It's a very different sort of place in the spectrum. But actually, there was talk, you know, years ago that everything was about an I-shaped lawyer. You had to have this really deep legal technical expertise, and that's what, you know, how you could tell if you're a good lawyer. And then it was, well, you have to have a T-shaped lawyer because you've got to have all these other skills across the top. You've got to be a project manager. You've got to understand the business. You've got to, you kind of just can't rely on just your pure legal expertise. And now I read somewhere that, I mean, it's just a bit ridiculous, really. It's now a plus-shaped lawyer, but actually the key skills is this empathy, this interpersonal, inclusive, listen to other people's ideas, this sense of appreciating diversity, that this isn't just, you know, buzzwords to tick the procurement thing. This is actually a way of interacting with people that we're working closely with, whether they're internal or external, or indeed the other side. You know, let's get this thing done quickly for the client. Let's work collaboratively. Let's work, show some interpersonal skills and actually get what the client wants done. And that's why, I suppose, you know, I'm not overemphasising technology. It has a role to play as an enabler, but fundamentally it is what Paul said at the beginning, a people business. And we want lawyers who really excel. Exceptional advice, I think, when you get client feedback, is generally the manner in which they felt that they were listened to, that they were, you know, that their pressures were shared and problems were solved. And I think it's about lawyers just being able to put the right combination of whatever it is, whether it's private client, whether it's high finance, to put that together in a way that gives the client what they want.
So strong emphasis on empathy and people, which goes along with what Emily Folk said in the AI panel. She even said chatbots are dangerous. So I want to pick this up and ask then, okay, but how can you use advanced communication technologies for marketing, brand strategy, but yeah, generally to support the client in some ways?
Well, funnily enough, that makes me smile, because I think, in a way, technology is neutral. How can a chatbot be dangerous? We use technology, and it's kind of how we use it, the way we use it, what the problem that we're actually trying to solve with it that really is the important thing. And I can see all kind of benefits of chatbots, certainly internally, in terms of automation, dealing with frequently asked questions for our IT help desk, you know, very, very practical use cases. So I don't see it as a problem. I think, yeah, sure, there's been stuff in the news, hasn't there, about people not realising they were talking to something that's automated, so I think there are ethical issues. But for us, I mean, we're not there yet. We're not trying to use those kind of interfaces to work with our clients. We're a bit like Paul in some ways, call us old-fashioned, but, you know, a face-to-face meeting is a high priority for us with a client. You know, even using video conferencing has been around for ages. We wouldn't necessarily just default to that. We would actually want to go and see our clients and have real rich face-to-face interactions. But that said, I think we've got to up our game, and we've got to be looking forward and have a strategy. It's got to be in our plans, really, for how we're going to enable our lawyers of the future, which are here today as well, how we're actually going to move forwards to utilise some of these technologies. But I can't give you a practical example because we're not there yet. But I don't see it's a dangerous thing necessarily. I think it's just about using it in the right way and within some kind of ethical framework that, of course, to some extent is always lagging behind the technology, and perhaps that is one issue that we need to address, that we're not continually lagging behind with some of these more ethical issues in how we use the technology.
We're in a similar place really to Rachel's firm in that we haven't got chatbots yet, but if we do envisage initial use, it's probably going to be internal, you know, around a lot of internal administration as well. They can be very useful. But again, I think, you know, you can't rule out where things are going to go. You've got to listen to your clients, you've got to listen to what they want. We recently, are slightly different, but we recently just rolled out e-signature technology just to make it easier for clients to sign things on the go on their devices, because that was a particular demand. So I don't have a view about whether chatbots are dangerous or not. I just think it goes back to how do you want to use them, where do you want to use them, what's right. But again, Paul, you've got direct experience with this, haven't you? So
the dangerous to your career if you're a Chambers clerk. I mean, Jonathan Maskew's a colleague of mine, and he's the voice of Billy Bot. I don't know if anybody's heard of Billy Bot, but it is a chatbot actually, and it's the chatbot for Clerk's Room. Jonathan helps Clerk's Room. They're based in Taunton, but they've got Clerk's Room Direct, if anybody's familiar, 6,000 barristers. And Billy Bot, he's got a bit of a sense of humour. By the way, Billy's the clerk off Suits, so we've gone full circle now, so that's where he... But he's got a bit of a look about it. Silk. He has a bit of Suits, is it?
Silk.
Silk.
Isn't it Billy?
No, Suits, isn't it? I don't know. Billy? Billy is... Suits. Anyway, Billy Bot, and you know, this bot books appointments for barristers under direct access, and he's growing at a rate of hundreds of % per month. I mean, it's Clerk's Room. He works 24/7. He doesn't take holidays, you know, and he's very personal. But that's just booking a diary, so he can arrange a barrister for you any court tomorrow morning or whatever it is. And he takes payment, and he sends you a confirmation email. So it's only dangerous if your job's at risk. But you know, sorry, I wasn't being facetious, but it is only dangerous if your job's at risk. The great thing is he's freed up everybody's time. Don't go to sit on the phone booking a diary. And people in a distressed, who are looking for what's called a distressed purchase, you know, probably quite happy to deal with Billy Bot. I mean, it's been around for years, hasn't it? I mean, if I used to book with Premier Inn, believe it or not, through, is it Tina? I don't know what, she's an artificial, she takes 3,000 calls an hour, Tina does, but she understands nuances, and you know, and all sorts of different language nuances. So it's been around a while. Chatbots are not that's the difference between that and artificial intelligence. That's different. I'm looking at, I don't know if anybody's looked at Amelia yet with IP Soft. That's the best one that I've come across. But she is very, very expensive. She's high maintenance, Amelia. I'm going to rename her, by the way, and call her April.
No, I was saying to you, though, I do think this whole personalisation of software, certainly in my context, is not that helpful in some ways, because I think we've got lawyers thinking, well, what is all this stuff? And then we're personalising something. I think it's a great marketing tool. I think it's a great branding thing. But does it actually help lawyers think, well, actually, this is something that we could adopt and use? You know, I don't want to use the word dangerous because we're overusing it today, but we don't, you know, to some extent, why are we personalising it? Why do we have to pretend something is human in order to kind of lull people to use it? Is that part of the change management thing? It might be from a consumer perspective, but it's not actually going to help someone like a lawyer think, oh, it's a good thing, or it's a positive thing.
Yeah,
it's
but
a bit counterintuitive.
Sorry, no, it's not. The reason is because my mum says thank you to the talking clock. I mean, if it's because it humanises it, right? And that's we are, as human beings, we will interact with people that react in a way that we react. So it's not some great mystery. This has been around for a very long time. And people, there was a survey not long ago that said that even though people understood that they were talking to a chatbot, that they were still much happier to do that, as long as it was in a sort of conversational style. We've just launched a property division and estate agency side to our business. And there's one on there, there's a programme we've just invested in where it is a chatbot. Instead of asking for where do you want the information sent to, it says what's your postcode, how are you today, and all the rest of it. And you end up with much more information than we would have done if we'd have just got 12 drop-down boxes. So some of this stuff is, and sorry, not wishing to, it's not about what the lawyer wants, right? It's not about what the lawyer likes, cares, wants, needs. It's about the client. And you know, I don't want to keep banging on about it, but I've been sat here since 11 o'clock. We haven't heard the client mention a great many deal of time. It's about how the lawyer's going to respond to this. Do you know what? It's not about the lawyer at all. I've got news for everybody. It's not about the lawyer. The client will walk with their feet. I'm not trying to be antagonistic, and but we need to get, it's a King Canute strategy to think that tech is not. People will always deal with humans. You can make tech as bright as you like, as nuanced as you like, and all the rest of it. But human nature will want to deal with a human, and that's going to be around in my lifetime. I don't think we need to worry what's going on 100 years from now, right now.
That's a great fit to the description of our panel, Customer is King. And I'm afraid we're running out of time, as interesting as the current discussion about chatbots is. But I briefly use the opportunity to ask for questions from the audience. So I see there are a couple of hands raising. Is there someone with a mic around that can address it? Okay.
You said start with what the client wants. My question is, how do you know? How do you find that out? Particularly when just asking them probably isn't the answer.
Actually, I think sometimes asking them is the answer, and I don't think we do it often enough. I think that, as we said, sometimes you have to take a lead. It's our job as professional organisations to be aware of what's happening in the market, to suggest innovative solutions to clients as well. That's part of our great client service, to say to them, actually, we think there's a better way of doing this. But I do think clients on the whole, whether they be private client or corporate clients, are quite knowledgeable, and they are picking up on things. They are dealing with a range of organisations. They are getting those experiences from their everyday lives, from dealing with banks and financial institutions that have adopted a lot of technology, and they're starting to ask anyway, well, why can't you law firms also do this? So I think it's a mixture, really. I think you do ask, and I think you do keep an eye on what's happening, and you do also suggest things to them.
I would say sometimes it's easier just to think about and articulating the problem. And I think, as Karen said, I think if we just have open conversations where we're prepared to say, well, what is the issue? What is the problem that we're trying to solve? And help our lawyers to facilitate those kind of conversations. Then we may not know the answer, and it's better to go in there without thinking that you've always got one. I mean, you might have some suggestions, some solutions. But actually just having that, back to those people skills about facilitating a conversation with a client around, well, what is the problem that we're trying to solve, and understanding that properly, and just being prepared to sort of mull that over and not have to give an immediate answer. I think those just very basic interpersonal skills, I think, are underused, and I think we should be encouraging our lawyers to do that more.
So I've seen two more hands.
Sorry, just quickly, there's two practical answers to that as well. Focus groups is what we've used, so you can get your sample demographic in a room and ask them. But the other one we use is split test marketing. So we will send one ad out in one paper and one in another, and see what gets the better result, just by little changes to the words. So split testing is good.
So just speaking as a client here, I thought it was really interesting that most of the discussion was about technology being used by law firms rather than necessarily by clients themselves. Like probably everybody else in the room, I don't phone appliance repairmen as much as I used to, because I can always go on to YouTube and there will be someone who has, shown me how to do a certain task that I didn't know how to do before. I'd be really interested, Paul, particularly from your perspective, do you see certain jobs that we see as legal jobs just falling off the radar? I personally wouldn't now go to a lawyer to get a will written, because I think I can just do it and find an online service to do it for me. Do you see more of that coming? And then on the sort of corporate side, again, I work in a large corporate, quite a sophisticated user of legal services. There wasn't really a lot of discussion about a bunch of jobs that just aren't going to get instructed anymore, that just aren't going to make it out of the building. Do you guys see that, or do you think actually we'll just sort of evolve and that's just kind of how the market will go?
Well, from a private client point of view, I'll talk to you later about your own situation, but generally speaking, 90% of our clients come to us from another firm. and then they see our marketing, they realise that it's not quite a simple job that they thought it was, and that there's other implications, remarriage and all sorts of things. So, so again, it's about what do you want your legacy to be, what message do you want to leave. It's not as simple. The question shouldn't be, have you made a will? The question should be, what sort of will have you made? And so that's always going to be a bit more different to just simply filling a form in at the post office or whatever you do these days. That's the first thing to say. In terms of where the market's going to drop off, well, anything that's to do with emotion, which is why, as I keep being a fan of private client, but there's a lot of psychology. People want leadership. You know, if I've got a client who's worked hard all their life with £100,000, and equally I've got one with 10 million, what I find is that they've both worked equally as hard in their own particular field, and they want to protect it for their family, and it's not about the money. They want leadership, actually, is what they want. They want solutions. If my boiler breaks down, you know, I could go on Google and I could go on YouTube to try and fix it, but I want the expert to come around and tell me what he recommends based on his experience. It's not so that if you position yourself as the consultant rather than the GP, which is what we try and do, then you know, your future's a bit more assured, I think.
I think that's a good analogy, actually, the consultant analogy. What I didn't sort of talk about was some of the, call them products, if you like, that we've had under development for particular clients, where we're combining not just technology, we're not trying to sort of resell technology, but we'll combine that with our knowledge and expertise. So a good example would be for planning authorities to do compulsory purchase orders. We've actually put kits together into a collaboration environment so that someone can come on and use those kits, and so essentially they'll still use us for the more difficult strategic stuff, but then there's all the sort of process, the notices, everything that's needed in order to do that transaction already online. So I think I would say we should see far more of that kind of almost self-serve, but with some additional strategic advice being bought from us. I think that's a really, you know, it's a win for everybody. So I think we'll continue to invest in those kind of scenarios that using the collaboration stuff, and then we'll probably be building some of the other capabilities on top of that. So we'll be able to see, well, what are our clients actually doing with that, and use that to inform what we do going forwards. But it's a good challenge. You know, what are we doing proactively? We see so many different clients doing different things. Can we then take something to them? And I think law firms, I think we should be more proactive. I think it's a good challenge.
And I think just to go back, I mean, I think it's very difficult at this stage to say which jobs are going to drop off. I think we're just getting to grips with the fact that the technology is going to certainly be used in place of certain functions or certain even parts of a job, and that lawyers are going to need a different skill set. So some of the large law firms are starting to train their lawyers in coding, and as we said, a lot of them are talking about increasing the empathy skills. But a lot of the technology even at this stage is not the total solution, so particularly for the corporate world. So AI can do with some you know, types of work very effectively, but others less effectively. So it's very difficult to say at this point in time, okay, that set of lawyers are going to disappear.
There's only one job that is going to drop off, and that is that of chairman, if he doesn't keep you all to time. So I am going to draw us to a close now. I'm sorry if you do have questions, approach the panel later, but let's thank the panel. Thank you.
Thanks for listening, and thanks for your valuable input.
So I've just got two takeaways. One is my summary of everything that I've just heard is, let's use the technology to do the stuff that isn't about human emotions, so that the lawyers can spend their time doing the stuff that is about the human relationship. And the other thing, it reminded me that during the DLA Piper cyber attack last year, many lawyers told me that they actually benefited because guess what, they met their clients and had a reason to build a relationship with them. So it's an ill wind that blows nobody any good. Right, back at 4 o'clock, there is a Wolters Kluwer talk in the innovation stage on the left as you leave the door. Otherwise, be back here for 4 o'clock, please, bright and breezy, for the final stretch. Thank you.